I'm going to ask you now to please turn in the blue prayer books to page 383. There are 5 short books at the end of the Hebrew Bible designated as Megillot. They're scrolls kept in synagogues and kept in the ancient temple, and each one is assigned to a holiday. This evening, the Jewish community worldwide begins the festival of Shavuot, the holiday, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of New First Fruits. And the book that is assigned to this Chag, to this holiday, is the Book of Ruth. You'll find an excerpt, a wonderful excerpt actually, edition of the Book of Ruth on page 383. A word of introduction, and then it's our privilege to present a very, very important piece of music presented by the choir and the orchestra. The holiday of Shavuot commemorates the unique and precious moment that the people Israel gathered at Mount Sinai to receive God's word. As befitting a God who brought Egypt to its knees with terrible, horrible plagues, the story told in the Bible about God's revelation on Mount Sinai is remarkably epic. It's remarkably cinematic. The people Israel, having journeyed now some weeks from Egypt, gather around the mountain. They spend 3 days preparing themselves, and then they come out to the mountain. The mountain begins to quake. It begins to shake. The description in the Torah is the description of a volcano. Fire and thunder and smoke and noise and boulders crashing. And from the sky comes this frightening voice, the voice of the Lord. That's how Revelation is pictured in the Bible. This remarkably epic moment, this wonderfully, wonderfully powerful moment of special effects. The Book of Ruth, which is this very, very, very short book at the end of the Bible, the Book of Ruth, which is read as an additional text on this holiday, has a very different idea about how this works. The Book of Ruth has a very, very different idea about how God comes into the world, about what it means to hear the voice of God in the world. The Book of Ruth has no crashing boulders, no quaking mountains, no fire, no thunder. In fact, the whole book isn't even about a people. It's about one family. About a family that leaves home during an economic depression and goes off to another place and faces tragedy in that place and comes home. And a woman finds a husband and begins a family. That's the whole story. It's not about a people. It's not about kings. There's no mountains that quake. There's no thunder that flashes. There's no boulders that quake. It's only about one thing. It's about something we call chesed. Now, chesed is one of those unique, special words in Jewish. Not only Hebrew, but in the Jewish heart. That's very hard to translate. Chesed is a quality of loyalty, of love, of compassion, of empathy, and of gentleness. Chesed is the thing you feel when you wake up in the hospital after a procedure and the person you care for most in the world is sitting next to your bed holding your hand. Chesed is the person who comes to be with you at a moment of deepest sadness and holds you without words, with a simple presence that says you matter in the world. Chesed, loyalty, love, kindness. Chesed is that special quality. And the Book of Ruth is all about chesed. The Book of Ruth says that if you want to see God's presence in the world, you don't have to journey to the Sinai. You don't stand under quaking mountains. That's not how God comes into the world. God comes into the world in 1,000 million tiny acts of chesed. Quiet, private acts of chesed. Chesed that gives us a sense that life has something yet to offer us, that we're not alone in the world, that we're not abandoned. Chesed, loyalty, love, compassion, tenderness, gentleness, intimacy, chesed. And most of all, the Book of Ruth says that chesed, there is a special kind of chesed when it involves people who are ordinarily rendered invisible. The name of the book is Ruth, and it's already unusual to have a book named for a woman. The only other book in the Bible named for a woman is the book of Esther, and she's very visible. She's a queen. Ruth is invisible. The Bible has 3 words for invisible people: the stranger, the widow, and the orphan. Ruth is all 3. She is a stranger. She is a Moabiyah. She comes from the people of Moab. Moab are the people you're not supposed to date. Moab is the girl next door that you could lust after but couldn't ask out because your mother would kill you. Moab are the others, the ones who are not us. It's the quintessential other. She is a stranger. She doesn't belong here. She is a widow. She's lost her husband. She is an orphan. She's separated herself from her parents. And she is a woman in a male-centered society. She is vulnerable and she is invisible. And yet she shines in this book because she has a quality that we call chesed. And the book of Ruth says that is what God brings into the world. And that anyone who brings chesed into the world becomes part of this family, part of this people. And anyone who brings chesed into the world brings God into the world. And the punchline of the book, if you don't mind me giving away the end, the punchline of the book is that Ruth will marry Boaz, and they will have a child whose name is Oved, who will have a child whose name is Yishai, who will have a child whose name is David, who will become the greatest king in the history of Israel. And David will have a descendant who will be the Messiah and redeem the world. The way you bring redemption to the world is by looking for that act of chesed, that quiet, private, invisible act of tenderness, of giving, of loyalty, and of love. Today we're going to be privileged with a marvelous piece of music, an oratorio on the Book of Ruth. You can follow the story on page 383, and it's my privilege to welcome Dr. Noreen Green, our conductor, to the bima, and ask her to introduce this piece of music to us and to present it as a gift for this Shavuot.
Shabbat Shalom. So people always ask, what is the inspiration to compose a piece of music? We all know Aloni was here for 30 plus years as music director and composer in residence. And where did he get the inspiration for all of his works of art? So I found this on the Aloni Foundation, and I thought I'd read it to you. This is remembrances from his daughter, Dory. It was Passover dinner, probably in 1980 or 1981. My little brother Danny was 17, both of us just a tad too big to be fighting over the afikomen. In those days, I sang in the VBS Choir. As altos, we always sang the harmony line and listened to the beautiful soaring voices of the sopranos carrying the melody. Since I couldn't make my voice higher, I decided to try to bring Mohammed to the mountain. I stole the afikomen before it was hidden, Dad giggling the whole time, and when Danny realized it was gone, he got really annoyed. He immediately started trying to coerce me into sharing my prize with him. So I told him if Dad would give me what I wanted to redeem the matzah, I'd happily share the prize with him. Dad listened to all of this bargaining very suspiciously and then asked me what I wanted. I said, in the next piece of music you write, I want the altos to sing the melody. Now, if you've ever sung in a choir, altos, right? That was quite a wish. Danny's face fell like he'd lost the lottery by one number. Dad laughed out loud and agreed, which is how it came about that Ruth has the melody line in all of the women. And the range is alto, wouldn't you say, ladies? So, the music Ami composed to the 4 chapters of Ruth, each one each chapter is based on a different trope or cantillation. He selected from the Italian, Morocco, Sephardic, and Ashkenazic communities. And as we change from one section to another, you'll hear the very different sounds of the trope, and that is sung by the women in Hebrew. They act as the Greek chorus. The men's chorus, over here, is in English, and they also comment on the action. The solo parts are all in English as well. Ruth was commissioned in 1986 by Rachel Guth in memory of her mother, Shifra Sher Clonimus. At the first performance, Ruth was sung by cantor Perrine Anker. And I thought it would be nice to have a kind of history of the performance of this Ruth, and she is today, our narrator. So we welcome cantor Perrine. Naomi was sung by cantor Viva Rosenblum. Today, it is sung by Phyllis Fleschler. Phyllis, when I performed this, how many years ago? 15 years ago, played the part of Ruth. She is now graduated to Naomi. The mom. The first performance, the part of Boaz, was played by cantor Nate Lamb, and the chorus was the Kol Echad chorale conducted by cantor Alan Weiner. And for this performance, we are so fortunate to have his daughter, Haley Weiner, playing the part of Ruth, all in the family. And we welcome to our VBS stage a student of Perrine's as Boaz, John Guest. So there's our cast for you. As an added bit of interest, I thought I would mini-stage the soloists and add a bit of costume. So you can see we are kind of in a bit of a costume to represent the biblical age. And I was inspired by this from a dear mentor friend of mine, Dr. Robert Strasberg, who loved to talk about the composition of pulpit operas. So we've turned this into a pulpit opera, and we do it in honor and memory of Dr. Robert Strasberg and, of course, our beloved Aloni. Enjoy, Ruth.
Let me tell you a story about two women, Naomi and Ruth. It's a true story. I know because I was there. My name is not important. I can tell you that I was their closest relative when they came back to Bethlehem. But let me start at the beginning. In the days when the judges judged, there was famine in the land. So a man named Elimelech left his town of Bethlehem along with his wife Naomi and his sons Machlon and Chilion to settle in Moab. There he died. There his sons married Orpah and Ruth, two Moabite women, and there they lived for about 10 years. When the sons also died, Naomi decided to return home. So accompanied by her daughters-in-law, she was on her way. So Orpah kissed her goodbye, but Ruth clung to her.
I will
And they continued until they entered Bethlehem. And the town buzzed. Could this be Naomi?
Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, for God has embittered me. Call her Mara, for God has embittered her. I left full, and God returned me empty. I left full. Don't call me Naomi. I left full, and God returned me empty. The Lord has tortured me. The Lord has hurt me. Don't call me Naomi. Don't call her Naomi.
And they arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. And Naomi had a relative of her husband, a wealthy man of Elimelech's family named Boaz.
Let me go to the field and glean behind the person in whose eyes I shall find delight. Oh, my daughter,
And she went to glean in the field after the reapers, and that parcel of land happened to belong to Boaz.
God be with you. God bless you. Who is she? A Moabite maiden, the one who returned with Naomi from the fields of Moab is she, and she asked, let me go and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. And she has been up from morning till now, hardly resting, she has been up until now.
Have you not heard, my daughter? Do not go and glean in another field. Do not go away from here, but stay together with my maidens. Keep your eyes on the field where they reap and follow them. I have told the lads not to bother you. And when you're thirsty, then go to the vessels and drink of that which the lads have drawn.
Why have I found a favor in your eyes, that you should get to know me when I am a stranger?
I have been told of all that you did for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband.
We have been told of all that you did.
You left your father, your mother, the land of your birth, to come to a people you did not know before.
You came to a people you hadn't known before.
May God repay your deed, may your reward be full from God, Lord of Israel.
God, Lord of Israel,
To whom you came for shelter under his wings.
May I find favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have given me comfort. You spoke to the heart of his maid, even though I'm not one of your maids.
At mealtime come here, eat of the bread, and dip your morsel in vinegar.
And he gave her parched grain, and she ate until she was full and had some left over. And she rose to glean.
Let her glean, even between the sheaves.
let her glean.
And let some drop out of the bundles and leave it.
Let her glean, let her glean.
And she gleaned until evening and returned to her mother-in-law.
Where have you gleaned today? Where did you work? And blessed be he who befriended you.
So Ruth stayed close to the maids of Boaz until the end of the harvest and lived with her mother-in-law. She went to the granary and did just as her mother-in-law had told her. Boaz ate, drank, and feeling good, lay down to sleep at the edge of the pile of grain.
Everything Naomi said, Ruth will do. Everything Naomi said, Ruth has done. Is
She lay there till morning, and she rose early.
Let it not be known that you came to the granary.
Let it not be known that she came to the granary.
Home to your mother-in-law, empty-handed.
And she returned to her mother-in-law and told her all that Boaz did.
Wait, my daughter, wait till you know how this will end. For this man will not rest until he finish this matter this day.
Boaz waited at the city gate until he saw the kinsman, and he told me, along with 10 of the city elders.
Sit here. Sit down here. Naomi, who has returned from the fields of Moab, is selling the parcel of land belonging to our brother Elimelech. So I am notifying you before the elders of my people. I am redeemed, and if you don't tell me, there's no one to redeem it but you. And I come after you.
I will redeem it.
When you buy the land of Naomi, you also buy from Ruth a widow, and you will have to raise the name of the dead upon his land.
Then I cannot redeem it, for I might destroy my own inheritance. You redeem it. I cannot.
The custom in Israel was that in order to validate an act of redemption or exchange, a man removed his shoe and handed it to the other. That was the testimony in Israel.
You are my witnesses today. But all that was Elimelech's, and all that was his sons from Naomi. And I take Ruth as my wife, to raise the name of the dead on his land. Let his name not be gone from among his brothers.
Among his brothers,
You are my witnesses.
witnesses. May God make this woman who enters your home. May God make this woman like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel. Be successful in Ephrathah and famous in Bethlehem through the seed which God will give you from this woman.
And Boaz took Ruth as his wife, and she bore a son.
We would like to thank Dr. Green, members of the choir, soloists, musicians, and all the artists who gave us this remarkable presentation. Thank you so very much. Is there a sequel? Is there Ruth 2 coming? Is that...